Welcome to Two Homes. This podcast explores the relationship between our inner world and the systems we live within, from our bodies and beliefs to the businesses, destinations, and environments we shape. Because sustainability that isn't embodied doesn't last, and well-being that stays at the surface level doesn't change much at all. Together, we'll explore what it really takes to build systems that support people, places, and the planet over the long term. From leadership and organizational culture to the hidden patterns that shape how we live, work, and travel. This is an invitation to look a little deeper and to discover how meaningful change often starts closer to home than we think. Hello and welcome to today's episode of Two Homes. I'm your host, Sarah Rhodes, and today we're talking about the greenwashing dilemma. Greenwashing is a term I'm sure you've heard of, and just to set the scene, greenwashing is saying something is eco-friendly or good when in fact it is not. And that's very easy to say. I'm not usually so with the black and white, but that is it. It is usually more aspirational than it is actual. It is saying something that is eco-friendly or zero waste or circular, because these are the buzzwords that are thrown around a lot now, but not actually having that system in place. So saying something is sustainable. Now, sustainable, let's talk about sustainable as a word. Sustainable means that you can keep doing it without depleting or without overexerting, without running out. It can be sustained over time. So when we say something is sustainable, and yet there is a downward trajectory, that it actually cannot be sustained over time, that is where there is greenwashing. When we say something is circular, but actually it is still that linear extraction, single-use disposal, which I would go as far as saying that compost is still a form of disposal. So we're saying it's circular, but it's actually linear. That is also greenwashing. And so most of the greenwashing that I see is not really intentional. Some of it could be construed that way. But when we think about the two homes philosophy of our inner world and our outer world, then it's not as straightforward as that. But I'm not going to get into that aspect of things today. All I want to do is try and invite a deeper conversation and perhaps examine things in a way that may be able to support less greenwashing, more understanding, more engagement and authenticity in our sustainability journeys, and more understanding of why this happens. I think we're very easy to judge, we're very easy to blame, we're very easy to see the other and perhaps not necessarily see the things that we can't see, especially if we're working in silos. So if we want to uncover our blind spots, if we want to make better attempts at not greenwashing, then we need to have more open conversations, particularly with the members of our very own teams. Because as we'll discuss in today's episode, staff is such an important part of this. And if they're feeling like there's some greenwashing there, or that they've pointed things out and they haven't been heard, then that's going to start eroding that relationship and trust within the organization. And that's just one of the potential risks of things like greenwashing. The other thing to say is that the focus on sustainability in business, whilst there have been some forerunners, like yes, things like B Corp started 20 years ago. There have been different associations and missions that have been around for a long time. There are incredible people like David Attenborough, Al Gore, and Jane Goodall who have dedicated their lives to this. But in the mainstream, in the business sense, this is a relatively new conversation. And I think a lot of the time, our efforts to perhaps show up and not feel stupid, I've definitely been in that position before. I'm sure we've all been in that position before. Can sometimes override what is actually in the best interest for ourselves and for others. So this conversation is about opening up greenwashing. Let's look at it a little bit more objectively, and let's see how we can overcome our newness to this, so that we can do better. And perhaps also stop ourselves when we are tempted to fall into the trap of accusation, othering, looking at businesses, calling them out without knowing the full story. So for the sake of today, I invite you to be curious, to have a look at what might be happening in your own organization, and even how we potentially got here. Because essentially, greenwashing talks to what I've been talking about many a time on the podcast already, which is the gap between what's written on paper and what's actually happening operationally. So in episode 2, we talked about dysregulated systems that produce short-term thinking, this survival mode thinking, which happens in busy societies where there is this focus on always producing more, doing more, seeming busy. Busy as a badge of honor produces short-term thinking, dysregulated nervous systems, and a higher propensity to falling into traps like things like greenwashing. In episode 3, we talked about compliance as a ceiling and how legislation alone is not going to solve the sustainability issues that we face. And in episode 6, we also talked about certification as a destination rather than a direction, and how certification can be valuable, but not if that's where we stop. And how all of these aspects actually combine together. They create the perfect ecosystem for greenwashing to emerge. And no one has really intended for this to happen. There's also more commercial incentive now to make sustainability claims because travelers are looking for them. Booking platforms are recognizing them, and marketing teams want to use them. I've had conversations with marketing teams where we've talked about broad terms like eco-friendly, which I'll go into in a little bit more detail when we have a look at the ACCC guidelines for sustainable and environmental claims, where eco-friendly was one of their key words. Yeah, eco-friendly is one of those words that now is so overused that it's really hard to know if it actually means what it says it means. So we're now in this place where everybody can say something about sustainability. Everybody knows that it's important in the business world. And so not knowing about sustainability almost feels shameful. And so we hide behind the little we do know, or we shy away from the bigger picture because it feels embarrassing. And it doesn't need to, because this is reasonably new when it comes to how we do business. I think we need to be able to take a moment and acknowledge that and look at how things have been going recently and aim to do a little bit better if we can. Sustainability is so often siloed into one role or one department, and marketing are making its claim based on what that role has told them, or oftentimes even not. Sometimes it's based on what's trendy or what they can find online, or maybe what AI has told them. But the truth really shows up with where these claims are being experienced by guests across the entire operation. And where there's a disconnect, then there's going to be a variety of different symptoms that show up. So there's 3 main patterns that I've recognized through doing this work. The patterns are, number 1, the marketing/operations disconnect. Number 2, the certification shield. And number 3, the fear of greenwashing leading to no action or downplaying the action that is being taken with regards to this. And so pattern number 1, this is, as I was just starting to tap into, the marketing and operations disconnect. So this is what looks like when comms says, here's a sign to put on the bed that says, leave this sign out if you don't want your linens changed and we'll just make up your bed. It is a poster in the elevator outlining the company's sustainability aspirations. It is social media posts that talk about all of the good that is happening. And it's about housekeeping stuff that haven't been brought into the conversation about not replacing towels. It's about zero waste written on paper sachets of plastic shower caps. It's about we care for the environment signs hanging above tiny bottles of shampoo and conditioner. And it can even be about asking the guest to opt in to not cleaning their room in order to save the environment. None of this is meant to be damaging. None of this is meant to be false, but it does rely on guests opting in. But it often also means that when guests do opt in, the towels get replaced anyway. The sheets get changed anyway. The little plastic bottles go in the trash anyway. I once visited the self-proclaimed most famous eco-friendly resort in the world, and they had single-use plastic water bottles in all guest rooms. What I often wonder is if you're doing big things but you can't see the small things, is that really the best approach? Is it that no one had felt that they could say anything? Is it that they were just having their own blind spot about what that means? Is it that the person who was doing all of the sustainability work was not actually seeing what was happening in the operations? These disconnects are not uncommon, but when we know that we're being looked at, when we know that guests are looking for this, or when we know that we're working together as a cohesive unit, then the stories start to become evidence of what's actually happening rather than aspiration of what they wish was happening. When sustainability stops being a story or a fairy tale even, and starts being something that is operationally supportive, it's when there is connectivity, cohesion, team unity. And is anyone actually responsible for the gap? And is that fair? Is it fair that front office get the complaints? Is it fair that guests may not return and just quietly give a 2 or a 3-star rating but no explanation? Is it fair that marketing staff are maybe aware that there is a bit of a challenge in implementing what they're saying? The second pattern I notice, I'm calling the certification shield. It's when the certification is achieved, and I go into that in a bit more detail in episode number 6, the certification trap. The certification trap and the certification shield are connected, but there is a greenwashing dimension to using a certificate as a shield. Something from quite a long time ago was about a venue in Adelaide. And at the time, I just started out with Plastic Free Southeast Asia in Cambodia, and I got a message from someone. They'd just been at an event at this venue in Adelaide, and they could not believe that there were single-use cups. They were actually really surprised because they saw a lot of signage around saying how eco-friendly this venue was, and they're like, wow, okay, this venue is eco-friendly. How wonderful. Hang on a minute. Why are there single-use cups for tea and coffee breaks? That's strange. And because it was like a relatively short amount of time after I'd left Adelaide, which is where I grew up, and where I worked in tourism for well over a decade, I reached out to someone who I knew that was working at this venue, and I asked about it. And they said, don't worry, we've got our EarthCheck certification. All is well. No need to worry. It's all good. And I was kind of taken aback because this just seemed like such a big disconnect to me. And so when the certificate is the final stop rather than a point along the way, is it saying to staff that this is as good as we have to do? We don't have to try any harder? Or what does it say to that guest, the one that reached out to me saying, hey, this is weird, I don't understand? What does it say to those guests who look more closely, who care? And if that was almost a decade ago, with the conversation, with the emphasis, with so much going on in this space, this is only going to be dialed in even more. Okay, so the third pattern is fear of greenwashing leading to no action, or fear of greenwashing leading to underplaying what's happening. Both of these fall into this pattern. So leading to no action, this is where we don't talk about this enough. This is operators who are feeling perhaps now left behind, that they didn't get on the sustainability pathway yet, and they're feeling like it's an even bigger beast to tackle. And they're worried about greenwashing, and so they keep a barrier up. They don't do anything or say anything. And I think, just hide and hope that it will go away. But it doesn't seem to be going away. And I think, if anything, more and more people are realizing that if we want to continue to have a quality of life that through this iterative degradation of our environment doesn't seem that bad, but is slowly wearing away, our tourism industry is reliant so much on the environment, so much on sustainability. Like, yes, there's seasonality, but we should be able to be prepared. It shouldn't be feast and famine. We should be able to be prepared for that seasonality. There should be sustainability built into the way that we're operating economically as well as environmentally, because that's what the guests are coming to see. So there is a group of operators out there, and maybe you're one of them and you're wondering, what do you do? How do you get started if you feel like you're behind? Or how do you talk about the great things you are doing in a way that feels authentic? And honestly, they're great questions to be asking. They're great questions to be asking because any forward step is going to help you to see that actually, once you get started, it starts to become easier. Because the cost of staying stuck, the cost of continuing to fear this mounting pressure is costing you so much more. And it's impacting your team. And it's also putting you at the lagging end of the industry. I want to point out that there's a difference between overclaiming and communicating honestly about a journey. And so let's talk about that line and how you find it. The same goes for underclaiming. Honest communication is the place we need to be. Honest communication actually builds stronger loyalty with customers. And I also want to point out that if you are doing good work, that silence means that other players might think that they don't have to act. That silence might rob someone in your community of the inspiration to come up with their own actions. Okay, so how do we find that authentic pathway? And at this point, I want to point to those ACCC guidelines on environmental claims again, because I honestly think this is just such a wonderfully straightforward, clear document, and it's actually a lot shorter than you might expect. So I'm going to just quickly go over the main principles, because just from their titles alone, just from a brief description alone, I think you'll start to get a sense of where you might be able to tweak things, whether that's dialing things up or dialing things down. So principle 1 is to make accurate and truthful claims. Your claims should be true and accurate. And thinking about this also from the lens of your customer. What is the overall impression you're creating, including the use of visual elements? The old arrow triangle that looks like a recycling symbol, the green leaf on something. This used to be more of a symbol of genuine eco-consciousness, but now it has been used in greenwashing a lot, so it makes it hard. So it's thinking about that, and in fact, moving away from anything that's alluding to something without having really clear, truthful, accurate statements to back it up, and making sure you're not exaggerating any of the expected outcomes. Okay, principle 2 is to have evidence to back up your claim, okay? This is a good practice to ensure that you've got this clear evidence, that you can see a clear through line. And if you've got evidence that's independent and scientific, that is the most credible. So to my comment earlier on certifications, these can be a verification of what's in place, independently assessed, if it's the right thing. It's unfortunate that not all certifications are of an equal benchmark. And so it's important to understand that, certificates aren't a be-all and end-all. They are a continual improvement model, and that physical on-site audits are really important. So if the certification is only done on desktop and remotely, there is much more margin for error. Okay. If you were to look at things in your supply chain, there's certain certifications that hold the highest ranking, that are requiring products, for example, to achieve 100% in order to achieve those verifications. It's not a matter of making the basic pass rate. It's a matter of either you get it or you don't get it. If we broaden this out from just sustainability, if you think of HACCP certification, which is food safety, you either get it or you don't get it. You're either serving and operating in a food safe way or you're not. So that's the point I want to make there when it comes to independent verification. Principle 3 is do not hide or omit important information. So if everything is okay, this is all good except for this one thing, and then you just bury that little piece of information, then consumers don't have the full story. They don't have the full picture with which to make an informed decision. So they need to be able to have that full picture. They need to be able to make those decisions with all of the information at hand, and it needs to be clear and it needs to be understandable, which we'll talk about a little bit more when we get to that point. Okay, if there's any conditions or qualifications on your claims, explain them. So again, thinking about some of the products that I've seen, the hotels I've worked with trying to validate, it can be things like rubbish bag bin liners that are biodegradable. It's what does that actually mean? And then when you get the certificate from the company, it's these are biodegradable under these conditions in a tested control environment whereby you can't actually replicate that exactly outside of a lab. So therefore, it's not really doing all of it's saying it's doing. Okay, principle 5, avoid broad and unqualified claims. Classic example of this is it's eco-friendly. Eco-friendly is broad, it's unqualified, it doesn't really mean anything anymore, unfortunately. So being really clear about what your claim is. Details matter. Principle 6, use clear and easy to understand language, right? This comes very much in terms of conditions and qualifications. If it's not easy to understand, if it's not clear, if you start talking about aerobic and anaerobic biodegradability, then you're probably going to lose the vast majority of people. So keep it simple. This is a great principle to operate by. Principle 7, visual elements. We've talked about this. Visual elements should not give the wrong impression. So recycle symbols, green leaves, green colored packaging. Now paper looking packaging, like brown paper looking packaging, is a big thing. It gives the impression that it's earthy, that it's natural, and in a majority of cases I've seen it's also lined with plastic. So making sure that you're not trying to slant or give people an impression that is not true. And principle 8 is be direct and open about your sustainability transition. And this speaks to the thing that I said about authenticity and clarity, and this actually being more endearing, more likely to bring loyalty than glossing over things, downplaying them, overplaying them. Being really clear about your sustainability journey is one of the best things you can do. Bring people on the journey with you. Hold yourself to account by being open and clear and transparent. It's okay to say that things aren't perfect. It's okay to say that this is on our list, but at the moment our priority is this. It's okay to say that we only got a 4-star energy rating, but we're working towards 5. Or we made this change in our operations and our rating went down and now we're working to get it back up again. These kind of honest, open admissions go a long way. Okay, so now I think we have a bit of an idea about what greenwashing is, what greenwashing isn't. But what about some of the costs that come in here? So the ACCC, for one, fine and fine companies for greenwashing if they're caught out, when they're caught out, and they're regularly posting these kind of things on their website. So there is tracking and there is accountability for this, which is really important. It's one thing to put these guidelines into place. It's another thing to back them up with action and enforcement. The other costs might include disengaged staff. When staff see that things are a little bit face value, they might feel a bit confused about what their role is, about what they're meant to be saying to customers. It can also mean disengaged guests. There are plenty of hotels I've stayed in that I won't stay in again because what they've said and what they've done hasn't really matched. Travelers are increasingly skeptical of sustainability claims, and it makes it really hard. It makes it really hard to know how to look for the genuine article, especially when many of the genuine ones are not speaking loudly enough about what they're doing. Sustainability professionals inside organizations who know the gap exists but can't get people on board to close it can be really draining. And so when someone feels like they're constantly trying to corral, trying to encourage and entice people to take action, yet are repeatedly overlooked, this can be really hard. This can be really draining, can be stressful, and it can be discouraging. It can mean that they won't keep trying to produce exceptional outcomes when they're not supported. When people working in sustainability or working in front of house and they don't trust that the operations or the claims are achievable, or they're not supported in getting there, their engagement declines, their pride declines. It doesn't make them happy to work there. On the flip side, genuine transparency looks like real talk. It doesn't undersell what's being done. It doesn't oversell it either. And I think it's important here not to chase perfectionism either. Sometimes I will make a genuine compliment to someone about the work they're doing, and they'll downplay it and be like, oh, well, there's still more to do. We have a tendency to do that. And what can be even more powerful is just owning it. Not out of defensiveness, not out of trying to please or prove anything, but just to say, this is what we're doing. So we've partnered with these organizations to help support food waste, but we're also looking at the upper end of the supply chain and wondering, where should we be reducing what we're cooking to begin with? When we get our organic waste collected and we know that we have around 15% per week, we're looking at how we can get that number down. We're looking at how we can reduce how much we're composting. Having actual numbers is super important. Weighing things, joining the dots, looking at the whole life cycle of something so that it doesn't just become, oh, well, we didn't send it to landfill, so it's okay, but it actually has a better story than that. Because waste is waste, whether it goes to a landfill or a compost. If it's being wasted, it's costing the hotel money and it's an inefficient system. Some of the most credible sustainability communicators in hospitality are the ones who talk about what goes wrong as much as what went right. And I really think that guests can tell the difference. Guests can feel the energy. Guests can feel the energy of pride. They can feel the energy of shame, embarrassment, uncertainty. So when there is a really strong, cohesive, aligned team where operations, front of house, back of house, everybody knows the why and the how, that is felt really strongly with the guests. When they can see what's happening, when they can follow it, when they can understand it, and when it's being explained to them by staff who clearly understand it as well. So I think it's important to note that it doesn't have to be about doing everything. And that's where this integration, that's where working as a team rather than a silo or an individual starts to help put things in perspective, starts to help put things into a shape, a priority, a way of addressing them that's manageable, attainable, aspirational, yes, but ultimately achievable, so that there is a real story to say, hey, we work together. Yes, we are bringing this up in our weekly meetings. Yes, we have changed this operating procedure to this operating procedure, and as a result, we have increased efficiency by 10%. We've reduced food waste by 3%. Working together, having a clear roadmap makes it all so much more approachable. When it's this big, blurry mass of sustainability, what do we do? Where do we start? It's all so much. It's stressful. We're juggling all of the balls, or more to the point, one person is probably juggling all of the balls, then it's overwhelming. Whereas we break it down, we talk about it, we dissect it, we prioritize it, then it becomes manageable. Then it becomes exciting. So if any part of this has alerted you to something that perhaps is going on that you didn't realize was greenwashing, I would encourage you to stay calm. Stay calm. It's okay. But it also needs to be addressed. And so at your next team meeting, bring it up. If it's not for a while, call a meeting, have a conversation, start to talk about it, bring up what you've noticed, and then start to find the pathway to making it better. So much of what we talk about here on the podcast on Two Homes is about the inner world and the outer world. And greenwashing is the ultimate manifestation of the outside not matching the inside. What we really need to do is bring those two into alignment. So another invitation is, if you're wanting to shift this, perhaps the next time someone asks you about, or something comes up about sustainability, and you feel your ego jumping in that you're meant to know about this, but perhaps you don't know as much as you could, I'd encourage you to pause, breathe, and ask a question. If it's something that you're being asked by a guest and you're not sure what the answer is, it's okay to say, I'm not sure. I'm not sure, but I'll go find out for you. I'm not sure, but I've been wondering that myself. Wow, that's a wonderful question. I'm curious to know the answer too. Let me find out for you. There are many different ways you can do that. You don't need to feel like you're going to look like you don't know what you're doing. But by being honest, by being curious, and by being proactive about finding that solution, that will go a lot further for you than any false pretense, any false pretense. Okay. Thank you for being here this week on Two Homes. This has been a short look at the greenwashing dilemma. I'm going to share some resources. I talked about the ACCC guidelines a fair bit, but there's also another resource from Tourism Australia that's recently come out titled Green is Our Gold. So especially for those tourism operators listening, this is a fantastic resource to start to use these tools with your team and start to unpack what sustainability looks like in our sector. So I encourage you to have a look at both of those documents. And as always, if you've liked what you've heard today, I would so appreciate a rating and a review on Apple Podcast, or if you're listening on Spotify or YouTube, please rate and comment. I'd love to hear what you think. I appreciate your feedback. And as we build this podcast ecosystem together, I really want to keep bringing you more conversations that take the shame out of sustainability and the mystique and start to bring more clarity, more information, and more approachability into how we integrate sustainability into our tourism sector so that we can really nurture our homes, both inside and out. Thanks for being here. I'm your host, Sarah Rhodes, and I'll see you next time.